So you were 4-year-old and your mother was trafficking you to these men that were setting up a meth lab in your basement?
Yes.
Welcome back to Other People's Lives. I'm Joe Santagato.
I'm Greg Dybec.
For anyone out there that would like to be a guest on our show, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Our email is oplpodcast@gmail.com.
Today we're speaking to a woman who was trafficked by her own mother, who was also running a meth lab in their home. So we've got the guest on. We're going to learn all about her story, those circumstances, and how she was able to escape them and where she is now. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Hi, thank you.
Of course. To start, can you just paint a picture of your family life and household?
In the house, it was me, and I come from a family of 5. So there was 4 brothers, and I was the only girl. And it was my mother and her mother living in the house when I first, like the earliest memories and everything. But I do remember as soon as my mother kicked our grandmother out of the house, like it just went haywire.
And how old were you at that time?
It was before kindergarten. I want to say I had to be 4.
Okay.
I distinctly remember her always being a drug addict because my very first memories was like being breastfed with her doing lines while I'm feeding from her.
Oh, you remember when you were breastfeeding?
Oh, yeah. I've had doctors comment on my memory and how when I've given statements and everything regarding it, and then going back in the court records, how it lined up to a T.
Wow.
Like very few people could do it, but I'm not the only one.
So you're saying you remember breastfeeding and your mom snorting cocaine at the same time?
I don't know if it was cocaine or meth or crack. I don't know what it was. I remember her distinctly cutting lines on a mirror with a card and then snorting up the lines with her friends while me and my younger brother are feeding from her.
And you said your grandmother originally lived with you. Your mother then kicked her out, and then it was just chaos. Can you describe some of the changes that happened when your grandma left?
As soon as my grandmother left, that's when the horde of men started rotating through the house. And I want to say that's when the meth lab started, because that was when we were no longer allowed in the basement or the ground level of the home. Me and the other kids were only allowed on the top level of the house. So the only time was when I was brought to the bottom levels of the home was when I was expected to have alone time with the men.
Alone time with the men?
Yes, that's how it was phrased.
And how old were you?
This was before kindergarten. So 4.
Still?
Yes.
So you were 4-year-old and your mother was trafficking you to these men that were setting up a meth lab in your basement?
Yes.
Wow. So when you say like alone time with the men, what were the circumstances here? Like do you have a memory of like what your mother would do or like the interactions that you had?
Oh, my mother would always go and fetch me from our playroom, and I would go down to the area that we weren't allowed to be in. And it was always like a big mystery, like, oh, this is where mommy always spends all her time. And, the men would always come up to me and they would always have something to give to me. And later on, I would know that would be considered an icebreaker. So they would either have a toy ready for me or a candy bar. And then that's when I would go off to be alone with them.
Jesus.
There was a special bedroom. There was a special bedroom in the area just for me to have alone time with them.
How many years did this go on for?
I was removed. The drug raid happened February 18th, 1998. So I was in kindergarten.
So you remember them coming and raiding the place? What was that day like? They just kicked down the door or something?
Oh, it was absolute chaos. What you see on TV doesn't justify how chaotic it is. So when you see an episode of a drug raid happening on TV, no, it is 10 times worse. Like they literally flipped the house.
Were you
So
aware at that time, or were you too young to understand what was actually going on in terms of like the drugs and the meth lab?
that was my normal.
But you could comprehend what it was, like what they were doing in the basement of your house?
No, that was my normal. I did not know anything was wrong with it. I do know that there was all these weird shaped pipes and everything, and that they would use it to smoke from, and how they would always have powder all over the place, and how it would always have a disgusting smell. But that was my normal. I thought every house was like that. I thought everyone would have alone time with these men. I did not know that anything was wrong with it. I thought my mother, when I was removed in the drug raid, I was sad because I was getting removed from and I thought that she loved me.
So when you were removed, where did you go? And what ended up happening to, like, after the raid?
So this was in Las Vegas, Nevada, and when you're removed forcibly from a parental's care, you're taken into state care, and it's called Child Haven. And so I was housed there until I was, and officially from that day, I was made a ward of the state. And from there, in foster care or Child Haven, my first home that I was placed in was with my father's mother, so my paternal grandmother, and that was a nightmare as well because she was enabling my father at the time, who was also a drug addict. So I was removed from a meth lab house to another drug house.
Jeez. Do you do you remember when you started to realize that what your mother had done in the house was bad and what your then father was doing was bad?
Oh, I remember the day like it was unbelievable. So it was May either 9th or 6th, 2006. So I did not realize what was going on in the house until I was in 8th grade because I was never put in counseling or anything.
So you were removed in kindergarten and did not really understand the circumstances at all up until 8th grade?
I did not. I had no idea. I was watching an episode of Law and Order that night, and it was like Tommy's Treehouse, where the brother was molesting the younger brother. And I had no idea because we were in such a drugged out atmosphere and environment that my older brothers were doing what they saw to me. And I didn't know any difference because I was already having alone time with all these men. So I did not know that anything was wrong with it until I watched that episode of Law and Order on TV.
And can you kind of describe like the feeling of finding all that out? Like, oh, that was actually bad?
I felt like I was hit by a train. I distinctly remember just throwing up. I was sickened with it. I mean, it was just like it brought down my childhood because the whole time I'm a ward of the state, I've now been placed with multiple foster homes, including my grandparents. I've had to deal with drugs literally every single day of my life, and I had no idea that anything was wrong with it until I watched TV. And later through therapy, I came to find out that I was taught nothing was wrong with it because they wanted it to stay that way. Because then you don't speak up if you don't think anything's wrong.
When you say you were like taught that, like, what do you mean by that? What were they doing?
Oh, I was completely kept in the shadows of. I remember being told growing up by my grandparents, like both sides, both grandmothers, like, what happens in the house stays in the house. you don't talk about what happens in the house. Like, so anybody asking questions, you know, like you go home and you eat and do homework maybe. But you don't learn to verbalize, hey, is this normal? Like, this is what happened last night. I'm like, no, whatever happens, you do not talk. Or I remember I found one of my father's pipes in the living room and I gave it to my grandmother. My grandmother said, whatever you do, shush, keep your mouth shut.
When
And like
you
just said it so maliciously, like I dare not say anything.
I guess, what was the age then that your brothers were molesting you? You said they were your younger brothers, right?
I had 3 older and there's only 1 younger than me. He is only 11 months younger than me. And I do distinctly remember that they were doing it to him as well. I don't know if they were doing it to each other, but the older ones were doing it to me and the youngest brother.
Do you know if that was something that just seemed to happen naturally, or like behavior that your mother was encouraging?
I know, I remember my mother and her mother walked in on, I could say his name. His name's Joshua. He's since been murdered, but he was doing it to me, and they walked in, they separated us, but I don't remember any repercussions, no yelling, no screaming, no discipline, no nothing. I was still allowed to be alone and around him even after they walked in on him multiple times with me.
And how old are you back then?
This was kindergarten.
And how old was he?
He would have been 6th grade.
Jesus.
At the time that you watched that Law and Order episode, and it sort of all sunk in how wrong this was, did you have a relationship with your brothers?
No. As soon as the drug raid happened, I did not see them again until I was already graduated high school.
And what was that reunion like? Like when you saw them?
So there is a 12-year age gap between me and the oldest brother. And I remember going up to him, and I was keeping an open mind because I was like, at that time, I already know we had a awful upbringing. I wasn't holding anything against anybody. And he did the creepiest thing when I got off the airplane and I saw him for the first time after all these years. And he made the comment about how big my breasts were.
Jesus.
This is your brother?
Yes.
Did you ever confront him or the other brothers about what they did to you? Or even talk about your childhood and what you guys went through together?
I did. So Joshua was the one, he actually got in trouble as an adult for child pornography, and he was a pedophile. And I don't know the other kids. I just know I was his first one.
Oh my God.
But he was gunned down and found on a dirt road in Las Vegas. And I remember confronting the oldest brother a couple years after that brother was gunned down. And I remember asking him some questions about, hey, you know, like mom growing up, like what was her drug of choice? Because she's never fully admitted to me that she was on drugs. She always skirted around or beat around the bush. She never admitted to it, even though I distinctly know she was. And no, she was a loving and great mother. You need to stop listening to everybody. You're so misconstrued. And I was like, oh no. I was like, here we go. And I was like, all right, never mind. And then I said, I remember, you know, you taking me into the shower. And I confronted him about what I remembered. And he went ballistic. And by how irate his reaction was, in my mind, I was like, that just confirmed that what I was remembering was in fact like how it happened. I was like, I wasn't making it up or adding to it because, you know, sometimes as a kid, especially if stuff happens as a kid, you're like, did I remember this correctly? Did that really happen? And based off of his response, I was like, oh, this did happen. And he does remember it, especially off of the sideways comments I was getting from him as an adult.
Right. How are you so confident in your memory of all this? Because it is like, it's fascinating to hear that your memories go back so early.
Oh, it was, all I know is that it's a blessing and a curse at the same time because I never forget anything.
I'm getting that sense. You're even pulling like dates, and I feel like doing like math quick in your head. And it's like, do you think you have like a somewhat extraordinary memory?
Oh yes, it's been commented on throughout the years, but even by teachers. Like if I like, oh, I'm trying to remember where this is in the textbook, and I remember it was like, oh, it was page 32, the first column, and it's just my memory. It's really, that's just how I am. I wish I could forget, to be honest. If that was one thing I could change, I wish I could forget stuff.
We're going to take a quick break from this interview to tell you about today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is Prize Picks, and Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players for a chance to win 1,000 times your cash. For example, do you think that Steph Curry will get more or less than 5 3-pointers? Do you think Jalen Brunson will score more or less than 22 points? I love basketball. We're in the heart of the season right now. These games are super important, so I love getting to have this extra action with Prize Picks on the games that I'm already watching. And Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this basketball season. You can make picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long. And Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. So when my picks hit, I can get money in as quick as 15 minutes. Nothing like cashing out easily and quickly. There's a reason that Prize Picks has over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. And you can sign up today and you can get $50 instantly when you play just $5. And you don't even need to win to receive this $50 bonus. All you have to do is play at least $5. So that $50 bonus is guaranteed. This week on Prize Picks, I'm looking at Jason Tatum for more than 29 points, and I'm going to go with Anthony Davis for more than 12 rebounds. We'll see what happens. I have a good feeling. And you can download the Prize Picks app today, use the code OPL, and get that $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. So download the Prize Picks app, use the code OPL, and you will get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Now back to the episode.
Yeah. Did you ever have contact with your mother at any point?
So I did contact her as a teenager. I had graduated high school, and I remember contacting her and trying to rekindle a relationship. And I know I didn't confront her or ask her about, hey, why didn't you ever try to get us back? I mean, why did you let your parental rights be terminated by the courts? Because by then I had already gone through all the court paperwork, and I could see that she never even showed up for any of the court dates.
Wow.
What did she say?
And I was nothing. She literally would change the subject or just, oh, well, I was trying my best. And I was like, okay, well, your best was not doing it.
Do you have a relationship with your mother today?
No, she actually died homeless in on the streets.
Jeez. I was going to ask too, were there... Sorry, go ahead.
And as far as I know, she remained an addict the rest of her life.
Wow. I was going to ask if there were consequences of that raid. Like, did she end up spending time in jail?
I can't recall her arrest record or any of her jail time, but I would have been. I mean, I do know she was taken into custody. I do not know for how long or anything.
So she wasn't in jail for years and years or something like that.
No. And then she was never arrested for the sexual abuse. After I was older, I did know that there was sexual abuse with all five of us. I just didn't know until I was an adult that it happened to all five of us. I just knew that it was happening to me and the younger one.
So there was no one mentioned that during the raid or anything?
No.
Jeez. How, like, as an adult now, or even, mentioning graduating high school, it seems like did you stay on a fairly good path or a good path despite like all of this happening and going family to family?
Oh, I had 5 foster families and I absolutely love them to death. I'm still in contact with them even as an adult in my 30s now.
Wow. I mean, these are some of the most horrible circumstances I've ever heard of, like a child growing up in. And like, what do you think like contributes to you going through all of this, but seemingly like being able to stay positive with the foster families, graduate, and, become a functioning adult on your own?
I must say, me having this conversation a year ago would have never happened. If it wasn't for me and getting into the church, like this would have never happened, and I would have never been able to get through this conversation.
How can you describe how the church has helped you?
Oh my goodness. So my church family is my family. Like I've never had, yes, I love my foster families. Like they were mothers and they were fathers and everything, but they weren't my mother and they weren't my father. I would always call them by their first names. I mean, it is a very different relationship. And even now when I call on them, it's more like me calling a friend. It is not me calling on, oh, I need motherly advice.
Mm-hmm.
But me and the Church of Christ that I go to, if I need a mother, I got 20 to choose from. And it is the biggest help and support that I have ever had.
Yeah. I mean, I think I can't even imagine being, that young and dealing with that sort of like trauma. And do you feel like, I mean, there's some things that will now carry with you through the rest of your life because of those circumstances?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the youth minister at the church, I have a daughter, and he went to go take a picture of her or hug her. He hugged her in the foyer church, and you would have thought I was ready to tackle him in the Super Bowl because I am just so on the defense when it comes to any man, especially when it came to her.
Yeah. Have you been able to?
I mean, I remember I gave birth to her.
Wait, you what?
I'm so sorry, but like I remember giving birth to her, and she was in the tray getting cleaned up by the nurses and everything. And I just remembered looking at her thinking, oh my goodness, I'm never going to let anything happen to you. And the amount of love, I did not know or feel love until I had her, just to be honest. And then I remember holding her for the first time thinking, like, wow, did anyone ever feel like this with me? And I answered my own questions because actions speak louder than words. And the answer was no. No one ever felt like that with me because no one ever did love or care for me like that. But just because that didn't happen with me doesn't mean I'm unable to do it for her. And
how do you kind of come to terms with that in your life? Like knowing what you went through and you're a child, you're a victim of all of this and you're defenseless essentially. Just like now as an adult, I guess just, how do you like go forward or even find the attitude to like love your daughter, but also accept that you were never loved? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, thousands of dollars in counseling. I had to be taught, I had to teach myself, and I had to go and like be taught how to love because I was not grown up with it. So, I mean, I like, just to be honest, it was like a little psychopath walking around. Like, it was just a feeling that I was unable to have. So here I am in my 20s and everything, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, like, this is a little, like, I should get help for this because I'm not able to hold a relationship, even a friendship,
So, but now
because I
you,
just don't have that feeling.
so now you have a daughter. Are you in a relationship?
So love relationships definitely was something I had to work on because when you come from a background like that, I was taught in therapy that I would be more prone to predatory relationships because I didn't have a strong foundation in the first place. And my daughter is a result of a predatory relationship.
So you're not in a relationship right now.
No, I am celibate. I am not, and I'm actively not looking for a relationship just because it's more like one of those things where I know I'm self-aware of myself at the moment and I know I cannot have one and it's okay.
Do you hope to one day? And if so, what do you think the steps are to get to that point?
Oh, I mean, hopefully one day I would be able to, but I mean, I just for an example, I mean, you date one murderer, like, oh, that's a awful happenstance that happens. Like, wow, but like when it comes to be like, oh wow, I dated two murderers, like that's really awful. Like there's something wrong with my decision making.
Is that
So
true that
no,
you have that experience dating two murderers?
yes. So one was he was in a biker gang and told me about some murders that he did, and I was okay with it because at that I was 19 at that time, and I was so out of touch and unaware of how empty I was as a person. And then later on, after I moved out of state from Nevada, I got in this hot and heavy relationship. I thought this was the one. He was a youth minister. He was a little creepy psychopath too. So, I didn't think anything was wrong with it at the moment, but he's actually a serial killer, and I had to report him to the cops, and there is an ongoing case at the moment because he has a habit of getting people pregnant and then drugging them to terminate the pregnancy.
What the fuck? Okay, we have a side story now that we need to how did you come to realize that? Were you potentially going to be a victim?
No, he did it to me.
He did?
Yes.
And terminated a pregnancy?
Yes. Christmas Eve 2022. And he admitted that he had done it before to the first wife who had the 5 miscarriages.
How did you find out? And what was he doing?
So I found the abortion pills in his desk and I confronted him. And I was like, this explains it because there's no reason why you would have misoprostol tablets in your desk. That is the abortion pill. Like, why would you give these to me?
So he was
this is
non-consensually giving it to women that he would impregnate.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Is he in custody now?
Not at the moment. I got a case number and everything, and that is like my next task of handling. But I had to go to therapy. As soon as that happened, I entered therapy again, and I was like, okay, the first round didn't work because I'm still making terrible decisions. Let me go back into therapy.
So, I mean, this is all very horrible. I mean, where are you right now in your life? Like, are you in a good place, like after being in therapy? And I know you said you're celibate.
Oh, yes. So after being in therapy and everything, I do feel great. And honest to God, I did not start healing until the church. I was just like, you know what did happen to me was awful, but like I still am a child of God. It does not mean that I am those awful things that have happened. And I know it just sounds really just off the wall, like holy cow, like you had an awful upbringing, but honestly, like if I wasn't, I should have been in therapy as a child, and I wasn't. Like the cycle could have stopped sooner than me being 32.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, hearing the story and then just the fact that like those circumstances, what you go through, and even unknowingly, maybe like the person that it made you, and then how that can just so easily lead to the cycle just repeating itself, just like unconsciously almost, right? But it's just like the people that you might be attracted to, or like you said, realizing this like inability to hold love, and then it continues, whether it's a cycle of violence, predatory relationships, you know, drugs, whatever it may be. And then, you know, so many people, unfortunately, that are victims of these circumstances of their childhood just cannot break out of that. So it is amazing to hear that you are in a good place now and have a daughter that you are showering with love, and that you're, you know, even like said, hold on, let me hit the pause button before I get in another relationship. So for you to like get to this point after the story that we just heard, and I'm sure that was even just a condensed version of all the things that you experienced, it is amazing to hear.
Oh, well, thank you. But I mean, like, there's 5 siblings, and every single one of them got hung up on drugs. So out of all 5 of us, I'm the only one without a arrest or drug record.
Wow.
Well, I mean, you know, we're as sorry as we are to hear about, you know, all of your experiences and trauma. We're, I guess, happy to hear that you're doing better now, and, you know, kind of making decisions like going celibate and, you know, turning to the church and, you know, finding some sort of peace in your life after all that, you know, could have happened. And we really appreciate you coming on and telling your story. We know it probably isn't the easiest thing in the world. And you also said, you know, a year ago, I wouldn't even be able to talk about this. So to choose our platform to, you know, share all this, we do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And I do think it'll be an inspiration. I mean, a lot of people out there that are trying to break the cycle of trauma or abuse that they've dealt with. And, you know, to see where you're at now, I think will inspire people.
I hope so.
Wow. Well, we wish you the best of luck with everything. If you do date again, we sincerely hope it's not a murderer.
Yeah.
Me too. I'm too far out right now.
Yes. All right. But thank you so much, and have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I don't even really know what to say after something like that. I mean, I'll be honest with you. It's so over the top with traumatic events that it makes it almost hard to believe. Mm-hmm. Like there are parts of that conversation that I'm like, is this real?
Mm-hmm. I mean,
but like, I think I just can't comprehend how someone can like live through trauma like that.
And like be having a conversation with us today. It's like, I think the craziest thing is just like, you're just born into what you're born into. It's crazy. Like there's no choice there. And some people are born into circumstances like that's horrible. That's one of the most horrible situations I've ever heard. From like the youngest age possible, you're being sex trafficked by your mother, who's a drug addict, who molested by your siblings. Like you said, it's like so much piled on top that it's like, what, how?
Yeah.
Like, how is this person even here? But
yeah, it's almost so bad that it's like, my initial reaction is like, this is fake. Like, that's my initial reaction. Like, there's no way. But, like, I don't know. Like, throughout the rest of the conversation, it sort of felt, we've had, being transparent, we've had calls with some people where they can't answer certain questions and it starts to feel like, all right, this feels like made up or whatever. We just don't put those episodes out. Like, as this episode went on, it kind of felt like not one of those.
Yeah,
like
no.
it felt like, she had the answers to all of the questions and everything, and it didn't seem like, I mean, the things sort of like lined up, like but it's like so hard for me to comprehend that would happen to a person. Like, that's how disconnected I am, I guess, from it. It's terrifying.
You hear stories like that, and like the way you can relate to that, or at least for me, is like, have I seen that in a movie, or have I read a book, or these like,
there are people capable of doing that even, which they are obviously,
well, unfortunately,
but it's Jesus
proven
Christmas.
time and time again, not to mention then getting older, going to therapy, and then dating 2 murderers. So but she's in a good place, and I meant what I said. I mean, it's so scary to hear that. Like, that cycle is just so hard to break. Yeah. It's so hard to get out of when that's how your life starts, and that's the trauma. And then even for her to kind of go through, like she said, like different foster families, and probably should have been in therapy sooner. And like, who knows what resources she was or wasn't getting to potentially help her. And look at the statistics. She had how many siblings, and now they're drug addicts or dead. And she's the literal only one of the family that's not. It's like the odds are so against you. So to then hear someone that went through that and beat the odds is just unreal. Like you said, it's hard to wrap your head around.
Definitely hard to wrap your head around. But we're hoping everything, turns out, well from this point on in this poor woman's life. But for anyone out there that would like to be a guest on the show, hit us up. Our email is oplpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, follow us on Instagram, TikTok at OPL Podcast. You can support the show at patreon.com/OPL Show. And that is all.
See you guys next time.